Today is June the 16th. Where do we find hospitality in the New Testament? Let's find out together as we look at 4 different passages in the New Testament. Turning now to the New Testament, we begin to find hospitality very, very early on. In the book of Matthew, if you look at Matthew chapter 9, verse 10, Jesus has just found Matthew at his tax collecting booth. He invites him to follow him, and Matthew leaves a prestigious, affluent job, gives up everything and follows Jesus. And in verse 10, later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. Jesus receives hospitality frequently. Jesus commonly relied on hospitality. We see him many times at banquets in people's homes, being invited into people's homes where he would stay with them. The next time we see hospitality is in the very next chapter, Matthew chapter 10 and verse 10. Jesus sends his disciples out 2 by 2 to carry on his mission of spreading the word of the kingdom of God. He says in verse 10, "Don't carry a traveler's bag with a change of clothes and sandals or even a walking stick. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality, because those who work deserved to be fed." Jesus relied on hospitality to extend the kingdom of God. The disciples were told to rely on hospitality to extend the kingdom of God. They went out on this tour, later on a tour in which 72 of them were sent out, similar instructions: receive hospitality. If the village is not hospitable, shake the dust off your feet and go to the next village. In the book of Acts chapter 16, Paul, with his small missionary band, makes his way into Macedonia. He goes into the city of Philippi, and in Philippi, he meets a woman named Lydia. He shares the story of Jesus with her. She becomes a believer. And in Acts 16, verse 15, she was baptized along with other members of her household, and she asked us to be her guests. "If you agree that I'm a true believer in the Lord," she said, "come and stay at my home." She urged us until we agreed. Lydia showed hospitality to Paul, and we find that the disciples in the book of Acts commonly rely on hospitality to extend the kingdom of God. Now, do you see what's happening here? Jesus did it first. The 12 learned how to do it from him. Now we have Paul also learning how to do it. A man by the name of Gerd Thiessen wrote a book called Socioeconomic Status in the First Century. And in that book, he describes how the early missionary bands picked up their process for evangelizing from Jesus' instruction to his disciples. They created communities just like the disciples were a community. They relied on hospitality just like the disciples relied on hospitality. And the fourth illustration, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 9, Peter, in his instructions to the early church says very clearly, cheerfully share your home with those who need a meal or a place to stay. Be hospitable, Peter says. We learn from these passages that hospitality is at the center of God's plan to extend the church. The church expands through hospitality. One way is by providing hospitality to visiting teachers, but we also provide hospitality to those who are around us, who need to hear the gospel. Secondly, it just follows. We spent last week talking about unity. Hospitality contributes to unity. Now, what about you? Who can you show hospitality to? Please like, follow, and subscribe to this devotional on whatever platform you use to listen to it. Send your questions to us at questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, we'll look at why hospitality can be hard.